I called out to warn you.
Before you ran away.
And then of course I ran away. Yes. Because there was a tractor coming through the tent.
Hello and welcome to the Waterstones podcast. I'm Will Rycroft, and after everything 2020 has thrown at us, we thought you deserved a little treat to round the year off. So here's a bonus episode of the podcast in which we get to speak to two stars of the hugely popular TV series Outlander, actors Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish. If you're not already one of the fan army, then Outlander is the adaptation of Diana Gabaldon's historical novel set in 18th century Scotland, in which Sam plays hero Jamie Fraser and Graham his uncle, Dougal MacKenzie. After working together in seasons 1 and 2, the two men set out on a road trip around Scotland to investigate its history and culture, whilst also imbibing a good sample of its famous whisky. So we sat down with a wee dram of our own to talk about the book that came out of this trip, Clanlands, Whisky, Warfare, and a Scottish adventure like no other. Sam, Graham, welcome to the Waterstones podcast. I should probably say, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Slanger. I say cheers to you. Thank you for joining us on this podcast. It's great to speak to you both.
Pleasure.
I have to say, every time we have mentioned yourselves, Clanlands, the book, Outlander, anything like that on our social media, it goes absolutely insane. There is huge love for you both out there. I've heard the fandom referred to as many things. Hooligans, I believe, is one phrase that's used for you in particular, I think, Sam. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah. Started by my mother. No, that's not true. But yes, they are extremely enthusiastic fans and have been from pretty much day one of Outlander sort of launching. And to be honest, yeah, the book as well. You know, the book has been something that they've really looked forward to, and I think have wholeheartedly jumped in and got on board with us, which has been fantastic.
You in the book you describe a few encounters actually with the fans, because they do sort of almost follow you around on your tour around Scotland. But
Yes.
I want to sort of start off really talking about your friendship, because there is something very, very unique about it. Did you become firm friends quite early on in the filming of Outlander? Was that always the case, or was there a particular event that sort of brought you together?
No, I would say we always got on really well. We got on really well right from the moment we did. I met for the role when I walked into the office. I took to Sam straight away. He's a very sort of engaging, sort of open person, and puts you at your ease and all the rest of it. And you just felt like this is a guy that would be on your side, and that has proven to be the case.
And then you found out the opposite.
Then the horrible truth. But it was all just a ruse.
All a ruse to lull you into a false sense of security. But,
Yes.
I mean, Graham, honestly, everyone, we had such a great cast on Outlander, and we still do. But I think that first season, we were all very much bonded together. There was a real core group of these Highlanders, and Graham was, kind of the ringleader. And that's where he got this nickname of Lady McTavish. But it's all in jest, and it's certainly a term of endearment. But it was great fun to see him on set. And I mean, we stayed in contact even when Graham left Outlander. And, I know that we would meet up in Los Angeles or wherever, and we'd have a beer and a good catch up and a good laugh.
Well, you know yourself, Will, having trod the boards yourself many times, that when you have a good group of people, and especially a good group who make you laugh, it makes such a massive difference, not just to your experience of the job, but I really believe it makes a difference to how that job is seen by others, in terms of the audience. You can tell. You can tell, even if you're playing a villain and somebody else is playing a good guy or whatever, you kind of just know that they get on. And I think the opposite is true as well. You can actually watch something and say to yourself, these people didn't like each other much. and I really believe that. You can feel it. You can definitely feel it on stage, and I think you can feel it on TV as well.
Don't you think it's something to do about, that the audience kind of want to be part of it? They want to be having fun with you. And and I think that's definitely the book, and I think even if you read the book, you'll see it. It is obviously our friendship, but there are other characters in there that kind of make up this ensemble. And I think, again, down to our crew and everyone, just really had a good time. And I think that should hopefully come across in the book and the TV show as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll both know that as an actor, when you come together with a company for whatever job, you have to form very close relationships with people very, very quickly, because it might be that on day one you're filming a love scene with somebody, and you have to be able to commit to that 100%. But then, of course, if you're doing a program for a long time, like Outlander, those relationships can become incredibly close, very enmeshed, and you're spending a lot of time with these people. So you have to kind of get on, don't you? And if you don't, it could cause real problems.
I was just about to say it's also about, I think, without sort of getting too sort of weird about the whole process of acting, but it's about being vulnerable as an actor. You have to expose yourself, in some cases, like Sam's case, quite literally. But you do have to expose yourself very emotionally, and you're opening yourself up to criticism. Basically, people turning around saying, "Oh, that wasn't very good, was it?" And you protect each other. I think in that group, you look after each other, and you want everybody to do well, and you want everybody to work well together, and that's what makes a good TV show and a good book and a good play.
And then someone takes advantage, and you find yourself on a tandem bicycle.
Yes, exactly.
Being led astray. Yeah.
I think, well, as I say, through reading the book, I do get the sense, Sam, that obviously this was kind of your idea, your baby, and you were sort of producing this TV series that has become this book. And you do make Graham do all sorts of things. And I can see almost the little glint in your eye each time you try and put him in a different vehicle or sort of get him to do something else. But obviously, all done with a lot of fun. But you're traveling around Scotland, and it is about this sort of engaging with history. Of course, Outlander is very much about engaging with history, but I think there's a real difference between acting in a show which happens to be set in a particular period of history, but then what you actually do in this book, which is to look at what really happened, to travel to the sites. Did you find that it gave you a sort of an even better appreciation of the real history of that program in the book?
Very much so. Very much so. I felt it was tremendously important, and it's the thing that's always interested me about any history, not just Scottish history, is actually going behind the sort of perceived view of something that happened in the past, and finding the multifaceted nature of history, and the way that clans, for instance, were completely enmeshed together. They were not these separate groups that only fought each other. Sometimes they intermarried, sometimes they fell out, sometimes they would form alliances, etc., and betray each other. It was really fascinating to meet some of the people as well, the clan chiefs that we encountered, who you couldn't make up.
No.
They were stranger than any fiction.
And I think Outlander, gave us. I mean, Graham obviously has a great interest in Scottish history, and he had an idea for a TV show, many years ago. And I think it just sort of seemed fortuitous that we both had an idea, and it sort of came together. But I think Outlander, for me, I think, and for a great many viewers, the interest is in Scotland and in its history, and people wanted to know more about the Highlanders and the Highland way of life, and that's why I wanted to do something based on that. And I think, having access to all these sites and contacts, it was amazing. People were very open, weren't they, Graham? They we literally were welcomed in and shown, priceless artifacts, and just had great access to a large number of historic sites, or various clan seats of clans, or whatever. And it was amazing how people just opened up and really let us in. And as we said, some of the characters we met were really larger than life.
And because we weren't prepared at all, we had no preparation other than a basic schedule, and our line producer had spoken to people in advance, but we'd never met them. So all of what's described in the book happens, as it happened. We would just turn up, and suddenly we'd be confronted by, Mons Bolin and his armored personnel carrier, and his terrifying friends, and beheading pits, Lady Cawdor, Ewan Cameron. I mean, these were great characters, and they really did so much of the work for us. We just had to sit there and really listen to them.
I'm glad that you've mentioned Lady Cawdor, because I think, especially for me as a former actor, that the idea of going to Cawdor Castle is extraordinary to me.
Great.
Meeting her, but also you mentioned there about historical artifacts. Could you just tell the listeners that you got to sort of to touch and handle something that most actors would sort of give their eye teeth to be able to do? Sam, tell us a a bit about that.
Yes.
Well, Lady Cawdor. I mean, obviously, the relationship there to Macbeth and to I mean, she's got a pretty, I guess, bad reputation from Macbeth, from Shakespeare. I think Macbeth actually it was a lot of fiction involved there. But we were so excited, and of course we were recounting my limited knowledge of Shakespeare on the way to Cawdor Castle. But it was just this magnificent place, and she was such a character. She was so charismatic, so charming. I mean, she's a Campbell. She married into the Campbells, but she just had every sort of attribute that you kind of would imagine that they would have had. Very intelligent. She welcomed us in, and she showed us this the castle, which was built on almost like something out of Game of Thrones. It was built on this legendary tree that was planted there, and she had all these sort of different ideas about the castle grounds. She has this great maze that's a recreation of the famous Greek maze with the Minotaur, and then obviously we went to this room, and there was this. Was it the second folio or first folio of Shakespeare's work?
She was, because we were waiting. We arrived, and there was this enormous circular table, and it was the cameraman John said, "Is there anything that we could just put in the middle of the table just to sort of break it up a little bit?" And she went, "Oh yes. Well, just that book over there, the leather-bound one." And we went over in this gigantic book, and I brought it, placed it there, and it looked wonderful. And I said to her very casually, what is that book, Lady Cawdor?" And she says, "Oh, it's the second edition of Shakespeare's Folio." And I literally just gasped. And I just remember saying to her, "Can I touch it?" She said, "Oh, yes, help yourself." And opening this book, it was extraordinary.
Oh, no, I think she just also I remember she had this tea. It was like homemade ginger tea.
Yes.
And kind of slightly strange, and she was very, dare I say, manipulative in that she got what she wanted. She was very charming about it, and she was, just wonderful, just a really, really open character. But there was just something about her. It just was like this. She is kind of, in a way, she is, the character from.
Well, she was
Macbeth.
She was very, very elegantly and quietly in control of the entire thing.
And we both fell. We both fell under her spell, definitely.
Oh, every single member of the crew, male or female, fell in love with her. I mean, we all had these sort of pathetic crushes on her by the time. You're ridiculously beautiful, so poised, elegant, intelligent, erudite. It was.
It was a pretty good day at the office, wasn't it?
It was.
That day, let's be honest.
It was. Yes.
Well, maybe the start wasn't so good. We were driving in. I was driving the camper van, and somehow, for some reason, we found ourselves on the actual race course for the local marathon, and so we were driving along on the actual course with runners either side of us up to Cawdor Castle. At which point we tried to get through the main gate there. It wasn't built. Yes, it wasn't built for a camper van.
No,
so we got stuck.
No.
We got stuck in this gate and couldn't back out because the runners were coming up to us, and then they were trying to get past, and of course we ruined their times. We ruined their personal bests, and they were.
I didn't realize that marathon runners could be so abusive. Actually.
Oh yeah. They may be very slight and slim, but they're
very
just
creative.
They run on I don't know, insults.
Yeah.
Fury, just pure fury.
Just rage at camper vans. Yeah,
they're just hungry. I think that's what it is, really.
It is.
I mean, for you, Graham, obviously you've been in many productions of Macbeth, and then I suppose to be able to hold in your hand that second folio, there is something about connecting with history that, in fact, runs throughout this book.
Yeah.
You often find yourselves in places where you're able to touch and hold these things.
Absolutely.
And I wondered, did you feel that those things? I mean, they are all, again, using another Shakespearean reference, touchstones to history. Do they help you to connect better with that idea of what happened in the past?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, right from the stones of a ruined castle to, Bonnie Prince Charlie's dueling pistols or a sword found on the battlefield of Culloden, the folio that you mentioned, all of these things, looking at the sword, the broadsword that the gentle Lochiel used at Culloden, and the flag of the Camerons that was wrapped around a man who fled the battlefield, and there it was, and it really does bring all these things to life, very, very vividly. And I think that's true of just the landscape of Scotland. That one of I say in the book, I think that it tells a story, and it really does. It's woven completely into the landscape, and everywhere you turn, there's something to remind you of often a very tragic history in Scotland, which only serves to fuel the wonderful romance attached to the country.
But it's interesting that Scots, we are very still attached to our past, and it isn't actually that long ago. But it's interesting that we have this identity and this real attachment to what's gone before, and whether or not it's been romanticized or not. But it is interesting, that as Graham said, wherever you go, it's tangible. You can actually see the history that's gone before, and I guess that's what made our road trip so special, and what we would encourage people to do: go on their own one, because it's so easy in Scotland. You can literally drive around the corner and there's yet another castle. Oh my God, there's another one.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting what you were saying there, Graham, about the fact that the landscape does this thing to you. Which is, I remember this when I was driving through Scotland as a drama student and going up sort of into Scotland past Fort William, and there is something, you hear the word like the Highlands, and it's not until I remember literally coming around a corner and going, oh, like the Highlands, like I understand where I am now. It was this incredibly dramatic landscape, and immediately you feel yourself going, I get it now. I understand what it must have been like 300, 400 years ago fighting on a battlefield here. But you can still have that distance, can't you, between yourself and history? But you, both of you in the book, you start to think and even to sort of find out about your own families and where they might have been as part of these battles. Did that help you to make an even closer connection?
Yeah. I loved all that. I loved finding out more and more about my family and really their journey, certainly on my father's side, from the Highlands to Edinburgh in the early 19th century. They came, and what that must have been like, arriving in a city like Edinburgh when you grew up in a Gaelic-speaking culture in the Highlands, and how sort of much of an outsider these people must have felt when they arrived. I found that really interesting, and it was just to tie in slightly with what you were saying earlier. It's of course a very strong oral tradition, the Highland culture, because they were not literate. Certainly the ordinary man or woman wasn't literate in that sense. So stories were passed down simply by telling them to each other. And I think that provides a real immediacy to something, that essentially a story that your father heard from his grandfather, who heard it from his great grandfather's lips, is something that could feel like it was just yesterday that it happened, even if it might have been 100, 200 years ago. And I love that.
Also, I guess it is interesting. We talk about the Highlanders and the Highlands, and look, back then, they were, as you said, they were a different culture. There wasn't much access to the Highlands, and they spoke this different language. They had different customs, and I think the Lowland Scots and the English, they were probably very wary of these Highlanders, and of course they were very powerful too. And that's when obviously things changed when they started building all these roads and these forts to sort of dominate and to also have a gateway into the Highlands of Scotland. But it was pretty impenetrable because of the landscape as well.
Yeah. I mean, for you, Sam, obviously, I'm just thinking that portraying a character like Jamie Fraser, obviously there's a load of history that feeds into that, which and then the scripts and the books that it draws from. But sometimes as an actor, it can be quite hard to feel that you're really connecting with things. But with this trip into the landscape, I wondered whether there were times when you realized that despite the years that separate you from your character, that actually when you stand there, when you're confronted by the weight of a broadsword, or when you're, the idea of people charging towards you, do you get this sense where you kind of go, actually, we're not that different? That if you put me in that situation, I would probably react in exactly the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we both had a moment there. We would go to the Highland Folk Museum and meet a great character, Jimmy the Bush, and we talk about Jimmy the Bush, and he presented us with a pistol and a sword and I think the pistol was found at Culloden, and just as soon as we both held that pistol, you just realize, the last time that this was used was by possibly a man, the same age as me, who fired it, threw it away, and then ran to his death or his demise. And it really brings it to life. And I think there's just something about Culloden, and I think that we were both excited about it. And there's almost this ingrained sort of national, remembrance about Culloden. It's like all Scots kind of know about it. And I remember when we even shot that sequence, like last year, 2 years ago for Outlander, all the extras, all the crew, everyone was just we wanted to do service to that moment. It was such a sort of pivotal moment in British and Scottish history. And it just, I don't know, there's something about it very evocative. And you just realize, what a great number of lives were lost here, a great turning point in Scottish history. And yeah, I think we just
it's a very haunted place. You feel it. You feel the weight of what went on there because it's such a wonderfully preserved battlefield. You really don't have to work very hard to completely imagine what it was like to be there on this bleak, windswept moor. We were there. It was raining. There was wind. The only thing that was missing was the fog that they had on the day. And how horrific it would have been. Starving, cold, wet, and then being asked to simply race into the jaws of the British Army, who were waiting with, I think, 8,000 muskets and however many cannons. Incredible.
It really was sort of the end of that ancient, also the Highland Charge, this ancient tactic and warfare that had been so successful. And really, it was about this sort of old way of life now coming up against like the new modern army, like the new modern way of doing things. And it really is a turning point. And yeah, it was very evocative there, wasn't it? And they actually, at Culloden at the moment, they obviously have this great visitor center, but to be honest, on the battlefield, all there is sort of the two lines are marked out by flags. And it just does it for you. You can sort of see the British line, you can see the Scottish line, the Jacobites. It really conjures up that sort of moment in time.
There is another phrase in the book, and after my terrible pronunciation earlier, I'm scared to give this one a go, but the phrase translates as belonging to Scotland. It's Alba and Dwalcas, yeah. So I just wonder, because we've been talking there about sort of the connection to history, but obviously, Graham, you now live in New Zealand. Sam, you're a modern guy. You've been filming in the States and, lived in London. But this idea of belonging to Scotland seems to me to be really particular. And I wondered whether you could both tell us a little bit about what that really means to you. Graham, I'll ask you first. In what ways you feel that connection to Scottish culture and history?
Yeah, I feel I've felt it whenever I've been in Scotland. It's somewhat difficult to actually put into words because it's very much a feeling that even when I used to get off the train at Queen Street Station or at Central Station in Glasgow, you could feel this sort of hum coming from the ground around you of just the people that you feel connected to. And one of the things that I always found whenever I was in Scotland, I never laughed as much as when I was in Scotland. Laughter I think it's partly just the dreich weather, the sort of the endless nights of the winter and all the rest of it that just engenders a really great sense of humour. And so laughter is such a huge part of the Scottish experience. And I'm sure, I suspect that even on the battlefield at Culloden in 1746, people were exchanging jokes, just making a laugh, just having a go at each other, taking the piss, whatever you want to call it. That would have been part of the whole thing, and I've just always loved that about Scotland. It's got a great humour about itself and about other people, and a great curiosity about others. Whenever I've been in a taxi cab in Scotland, taxi drivers in Scotland ask you about you,
Notorious, yeah.
who you are, what's your story, where are you from. They don't want to talk about themselves so much, and I think that's the sign of a very strong, outward-looking and secure culture.
And Sam, how would you just sort of, because that phrase I believe is engraved on your sword, is that right in the
That's
show?
right. Yeah.
Which you carry everywhere, don't you?
Well, obviously,
Which
yeah.
I do. I'm holding right now. Yes. Yeah. Dulchas. Yeah. And it means a sense of belonging or sense of home. And it was something that I was taught by a Gaelic friend of mine back in season 1. And it's interesting that it came up in writing the book and in shooting the TV show, and we talk about it. But it's something, for instance, I was always skeptical when we have tourists come to the UK or to Scotland, especially American tourists or Canadian, they're like, oh my God, I'm Scotch, or I'm part Scotch. And for a long time I was like, no, you're not, or like, whatever, like, whatever. And I just, I realized, foolishly, that of course these people, they left and they migrated to Canada and America and to wherever, to Australia and New Zealand. And only a couple of generations ago, 3 or 4 generations ago, but there must be something in you genetically that has this longing for home. And actually, I think it's extremely, extremely strong with Scotland. I don't know why, but I now fully understand what that's about. It's like they can't describe what it is, and they don't know what it is. But when they come to Scotland, they feel at home. They feel that there's something there that grounds them. And I think it's a genetic thing. I really do.
We've spoken a little bit about some of the sort of ways in which you've been placed in peril, shall we say, Graham, whether it's a tandem bicycle or just simply being driven by Sam along the highways.
Driven mad, yeah.
And driven mad, yes. But there is a part in the book where there is a moment where you talk about, Graham, you quite literally saved Sam's life during the course of filming Outlander.
No, I mean...
You're so ungrateful. It's so extraordinary. I called out...
Saved his own life.
I called out to warn you. And
before you ran away.
And then of course I ran away. Yes. Because there was a tractor coming through the tent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, but Sam has always denied that I really saved his life, but that's okay. That's okay. I'll just carry on just being his guardian angel with no thanks.
Graham has this great, and probably why he does so well is that he's very good at preserving his own skin, and I think it became quite a source of amusement, or not only on our show and on the book during shooting this and writing this, but also even on Outlander. There was a time when I remember we were shooting with a big whole sort of village scene, and at one point there was a Highland cow or Highland coo, and it started to buck and wasn't very happy about shooting such long hours. Graham sidled up to me and was like, I know, I have an escape plan. I know where I'm going. I'm going over that wall. And you could see him I could watch him during the takes. He was sort of edging closer and closer to the wall. So just in case, he would just be over that wall. So I would say stick with McTavish if you want to survive.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. Yes, I when we were doing Outlander, I do remember with the horses, people had varying degrees of good fortune with horses. I was very fortunate with mine. Mine was just so patient with me. But a couple of the other cast members weren't so lucky. And I do remember in an episode of, we were going away from the castle, going on to Rent. It was the end of the episode. The light was fading. I was at the front. Everyone else was at the back. And I remember all I could hear was, I think it was Stephen Walters
Yeah,
and Bunter
remember
Rourke
that.
sort of
Yeah,
screaming in the background as their horses were trying to
yeah.
throw them to the ground. And I didn't even look round.
No,
Um,
carried on.
I
Yeah,
just I
regardless.
just made sure that I was in focus and
Yes,
the camera was on me, and
safe.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
Even within the course of this conversation, people will hear the sort of, the way the two of you kind of, the repartee, the sort of the conversation that happens with the two of you. And reading this book is very much like that. It is a conversation
Yeah.
between the two of you and telling that story. But how did you write it? Because of course it involves both of you. Were you literally sort of sending chunks to each other, or did you both sort of set down your version of events? It's quite an undertaking, obviously, to write
We
something together.
we started writing basically when that sort of international lockdown happened, and we were different parts of the world. Graham was in New Zealand, I was in Scotland, and we started writing. Well, talking about technology and Graham's sometimes
Yes.
dubious grasp on how to use technology. It started off by emailing each other documents, and then it turned into, I think, a Word document. But then after a while, Graham accuses me of locking him out of the Word document, which I didn't do. So then we had to change to a Google document, which he then was able to access, and that was fine. But we were writing at the same time, and we would sort of have bi-weekly Zoom calls and have a chat about what we had to do next, and then go away and do our homework. And it would be fun because you'd be writing about the same thing at the same time on this shared document, and you could actually see the other person writing, which I think is where this sort of back and forth started, where we started to, dare I say, correct each other in.
Yes, it was gently correcting each other. You would read something and you would go, "Well, I'm not sure that's exactly how that happened," and so you would write something and you'd suddenly see, maybe Sam's cursor would start and you'd see him writing. It was quite fascinating, actually. I've never done anything like that before,
Yeah.
where you're actually having that real time conversation via a shared document. It was, yeah, but that was the basis of the book. Absolutely.
We've spoken a little bit about the two of you driving each other around Scotland and probably around the bend a little bit too. But I want to ask a little bit about what drives you personally as people, because Sam, I noticed at the end of the book, you're described in your bio as a philanthropist. And I was like, blimey, that's quite a strong word for such a young man. And then I read what you had actually done and I felt suitably chastened, because the word philanthropist obviously coming from the incredible fundraising that you've done for various charities, but also the fact that you are producer for these TV programs we've been talking about, a huge driving force. And in fact, Graham is very generous towards the end of the book in talking about his admiration for the way that you take life by the scruff of the neck. And you seem to be incredibly driven in creating all of these things. Where does that come from?
That is a good question, and yeah, philanthropist does sound rather I don't know, rather generous, but yeah, I mean, I think it's fair enough. I think I have, I don't know, a drive that's come from the fact that I never had the opportunity before. Maybe I think Outlander has given me a lot of opportunity, and I've realized, that now is the time that I can do these things. And I think before, being a jobbing actor, you're always held back by just your circumstances, or trying to make ends meet, or not having time, or not having the right contacts. And suddenly I realized that I have all these great contacts, and I love doing business, and I love seeing what the next challenge is. And I think Graham's described me as not having really thought about the consequences of things. And I think if I actually think about the consequences, it would freak me out. So I guess jump in feet first and see what will happen, and hopefully come up breathing. I think that's what probably works with our relationship as well. We're kind of, dare I say, yin and yang, in a way.
Yeah, yes. I mean, you're definitely, the risks, the physical risks that you're willing to take are certainly much greater than mine. Which is admirable. I mean, it's great, and it was a wonderful thing that you took me out of my comfort zone on many, many occasions, and I really, but actually in a strangely enjoyable way. I mean, not having my backside destroyed on a tandem bike necessarily, but other things. But I also think that actors by sort of nature are all a bit like that. You benefit a great deal as actors by not really knowing what's coming, and so you just throw yourself into things. And And I've certainly found that in my life, that an actual lack of preparation sometimes is a real advantage. That you,
Yeah. But
you
I think also you're always waiting for someone else to make a decision for you, to tell you what you can and can't do. As an actor, you've got this job or you haven't, or you're auditioning for something, and it just feels like actually taking control of your career and your destiny, that sort of thing. It's so rewarding, and I think I enjoy all these sort of other endeavors, and I think they all feed back into each other. I think I remember going, I was working on Outlander whilst shooting this Clanlands first part of Men in Kilts, and I remember it would give me energy going to do Clanlands because it was something different and something to sort of throw myself into. And yeah, I think it all feeds back. It's sort of creativity is also energy, and keeps you going.
it is great to have that feeling of being in charge of your own destiny as well.
Yeah.
Because as you rightly say, so much of an actor's life is spent waiting on other people to give you permission to do what you enjoy. And with this, I mean, I remember very early on, I think Sam and I standing together with a guest before we did something, and just both realizing what enormous fun this was, that we were in charge. It was like, hey, we don't need to ask anybody. We're just going to do this, and we're going to ask this, and then we're going to go here. And that was rather wonderful, actually.
And it's the same with the book, I think. It really is. I guess it's very personal, right? I mean, as it can be, and we, from the illustrations to the quotes to the bits of poetry or whatever. It's lovely to be able to craft something and create something, and it was a really fun process.
Now, I have reached the stage where I've realised that the glass with which I said cheers at the beginning of this conversation needs a refill, which means I've probably taken up far too much of your time already, gentlemen. I mean, it's been a brilliant conversation, and it's fascinating to hear more about your relationship on the show, and also, obviously, in making this book. But it's just great to have a bit of time to talk to you about it today, so thank you so much.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, really fun. Really good to chat.
So that really is it now for the podcast in 2020. I hope that you've enjoyed the episodes this year, as we've tried to provide not just entertainment during lockdown, but also books that have helped us to deal with the difficulties that this year has placed in our paths. We hibernate for the winter now, but work has already begun on a new series for next year, which I'm really excited about. It's a new direction for the podcast, and I can't say too much about it now, but if you love books, and I think after all this time we know that you do, then I know you're going to really love what we're doing next. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2021.